There's no silver bullet. There's no magic answer. There's no magic wand that is going to make your flipping business successful. There's 100 golden BBs, right? There are a ton of these little, small, basic things that you just need to do consistently and you need to do really, really well. The phrase do the boring work is very applicable in the business of flipping and doing so successfully because you just got to do the boring work over and over and over, and you just got to do it really, really well. Welcome to the Ryan Rice Show, where we talk about what we learned yesterday that we can apply today so that we can be better tomorrow. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. I had a great conversation recently with a really good friend who's going to flip more than 50 houses this year. And I asked him, what are the top 3 things that make you most successful in this business? What are the 3 most important things that you do that enable you to flip 50 houses successfully? And I want to share his answers with you because they're really, really good. And I have not come anywhere near flipping 50 houses in 1 year, but I have flipped as many as 20 as one time. And I thought these insights were excellent. So I want to share them with you. I am a full-time real estate entrepreneur. I'm in my 4th year full-time. I did 40 deals last year, and I try and share as much as I can with you guys to make you successful in your real estate business or general business. And hopefully the mistakes that I have made can help you get the learnings without the scars. So let's get into these 3 things that are key to flipping 50 houses in a year. The first thing he told me, and this came as no surprise to me, but his first key of flipping this many houses in a year is his book of subcontractors. And the reason why this wasn't a surprise is because I flipped a bunch of houses and I've had really good contractors and I have unfortunately had bad contractors. And that was all the difference, right? And whether or not the job was good, whether or not I made money, whether or not I lost money, a lot of it came down to the contractors. So the fact that this was his number 1 was not a big surprise to me at all. And what's funny about this, I have another friend who's probably going to flip over 50 houses, and I have not asked him these 3 questions. But one thing that I do know, because I have been on site with his team before and I've walked some of his jobs, he's got a lot of subcontractors that work directly for him as W-2 employees, and he's got immense control over construction. So the fact that my friend here locally, this was his first key, super not a surprise. And a little bit of insight into his team. He's got plumbers on his team. He has electricians on his team. And he has a lot of control over the construction process. And I think that's super important. And when you're first getting started, obviously you have significantly less control and you're probably using general contractors, and that's fine. But over time, he has built this phenomenal group of contractors and subcontractors, and that's absolutely key to his success. And not only does he have this great team, but he is very involved in construction. And he recently hired a full-time project manager, and so he is trying to become less involved. But for the first 3-4 years of his business, he's incredibly involved. And that's the same with my other friend who flips a ton of houses as well. Super involved. And it's not a surprise because the flipping business is construction, right? The quality of construction is super important. It's important for you to be a sustainable flipper. You have to be able to put houses on the market and have them sell, which means you can't produce a bad product, because if you do produce a bad product, it's not going to sell. It's going to impact your profit margins. And if you do that too many times, it's going to catch up to you. And so having incredibly good quality construction and then having people that can get the construction done in a very timely manner is important. And not paying, a 40 to a 50% margin to a big retail contractor obviously is important as well, because when you're flipping a house, your margins are a lot smaller. You need people that can do good work at a good price. And one thing he told me, because I asked him, I said, hey, how did you find these good quality subcontractors? And he said, well, it started and I had a few, but then the good workers always know the best workers, right? And he said the best contractors, they all go to Home Depot, they all go to Lowe's at the same time, they all work with each other on jobs. And so he was like, if you find a really, really good HVAC guy, for example, the chances are that he works or that he knows a really good plumber and a really good electrician, because HVAC plumbers and electricians, they all got to work together on jobs. And the best HVAC guys, it's likely that they're consistently working with really good plumbers and really good electricians. So I thought that was kind of a good tip as well. So for those of you that are out there flipping, if you come across a really good HVAC person or a really good plumber or a really good electrician, there's a good chance that one of those people will know a really good other subcontractor that you could potentially tap into. And it was funny, I actually put this to use recently because I have this great HVAC guy who's done a ton of work for me. He's been doing work for me for probably more than 5 years. And after that conversation, I never thought to reach out to him to ask him this question, but I reached out to him. I was like, hey, I got a job right now. I need an electrical panel moved. Do you know a good electrician? And literally within 60 seconds, I had a text with an electrician, had a call with him the next day, and he turned out to be a good contact. And so I put that to practice, and it was useful for me, and I thought that was a good tip. The next question I asked him was, how do you make sure that you keep your best contractors? And he said one thing that was super important is you have to communicate to them in advance and be transparent about your work, right? The best contractors get paid when they do work, and when they don't get work, they don't get paid. So who are they going to naturally gravitate towards? They're going to gravitate towards people they know will give them consistent work. And if there's ever something that happens and they're working for you and then they can't work that day because of whatever reason, then that's just one notch on their belt that's going to motivate them to go try to find somebody else that can ensure that this contractor has consistent work. And my buddy has such consistent work now. If he's going to flip 50 houses this year, obviously he's got a lot of work always, but there are times even when he might have, say he finishes several jobs at one time and he might not have something immediately in the hopper. Something my friend does is he communicates to them more than 2 weeks in advance and tells them, hey, I'm going to have this little gap. I want you to know so that you can do whatever you want to do. And he says sometimes they'll just take time off and take care of their stuff because they're normally working, 6, 7 a.m. until whenever. And banks aren't open. It's hard for them to run errands during the day. And so maybe they'll take time off and do their errand type stuff. Or communicating 2 weeks in advance helps ensure that if they want to go find other job and make sure that they're going to get paid that week, that it gives them that notice. And they're very appreciative of that. Real quick, as you guys know, I just recently started this podcast. If you could give it a rating with a quick tap of the thumb, that would mean the world to me. And even more importantly, it could help spread the word to a broader audience, which in turn could help change a life. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. And because of that, they always come back to him. He's providing them consistent work, and because he's always thinking about them and ensuring that they're just randomly not going to be out of a paycheck in 1 week, they obviously appreciate that. And I thought that was really good. And lastly, he says, I pay them very promptly. Every single Monday, I run payroll, and you better believe that if something happens and payroll gets messed up and they don't have money in their account by the end of the day, I hear from them. But he takes care of them, he pays them promptly, and he communicates to them well in advance if they're not going to have work. And I thought that was really, really good. So my takeaway here was that if you want to be the best, and I say if you want to be the best because the two best flippers that I know, which are these two people that I just talked about, they have a lot of control over their construction. They have great subcontractors, and they go out of their way to make sure that these contractors are taken care of. So if you want to be the best, that is probably something that you may want to consider doing over the long haul, is getting some control over your construction by hiring great people and taking control over your construction process. Success leaves clues. Closing thought here on subcontractors. Something he said later to me in the conversation that I thought was so incredibly insightful. And he did not mean to share this as like, oh, this is my key insight, but he said it and it was so subtle and I thought it was so good. He said, something I found that I really love to do on Saturdays is I wake up in the morning and I just like to go be with my guys. He said, some of the people that I built relationships with on my construction team, I genuinely love hanging out with them. And I love going on Saturday mornings and being with them. And they're just cool people. And man, I loved that because that shows me that he finds true intrinsic joy on being with his team and from the construction process. And guess what? You're never going to beat somebody who truly finds joy in what it is that they have to do, truly finds joy in the boring work. And the fact that he genuinely gets joy out of being with his construction team says everything that I need to know. And that, I think, is a big key to why he's successful. The second key he shared with me as a key to his success is to know the areas that you're flipping in really, really well. And he told me a very quick story. He said there was a time early in my flipping career where there was a part of town that nobody else wanted to buy in. There was some land, there was some property, nobody else wanted to buy there. But because I knew this area really well, and I knew the area really well because of X, Y, and Z reason, I knew that there was something here. And so I was able to go buy in these areas. I was able to flip in these areas. And I was able to do really well because I knew the areas really well. And that makes a ton of sense. And for me, that has been also something that I have experienced. I've flipped in areas that I know well. I've flipped in areas that I don't know as well. And honestly, when I have flipped in areas that I don't know as well, or I don't have as much local expertise, the flips haven't gone as well. But when I have flipped in areas that I know really well and I know what to expect, then obviously I can make adjustments accordingly. And I asked him, I was like, well, what is your key? How do you get to know these areas really well? Because obviously at some point you don't know the areas as well. And he's like, honestly, I just make sure that I find really, really good realtors in these areas. So of course I asked him how, and very basic, nothing groundbreaking here, but he said you just go to recently sold listings in the area and you find the names that keep popping up consistently over and over. You can do this on Redfin, you can do this on Zillow if you have access to the MLS, obviously you can do it there. And then he would just go build relationships with those people. And by building relationships with realtors who are constantly doing deals, well, who's going to know the areas best? They are. So go build relationships with your realtors. Go find out who is doing the volume in your area. And this, if you've listened to some of my recent podcasts, you know that I flipped a house in an area for the first time. And this was a huge learning for me. I hired a realtor who didn't do a ton of volume in this area. I had to bring in another realtor who had done a ton of volume in this area, and it made all the difference. And so I thought this was a really, really good key and kind of simple to figure out how to get to know your area well. Just go find the people who are constantly doing deals in these areas. The third key he shared with me, and this goes hand in hand with number one, but the third key he shared with me is scheduling. He said, if you want to lose really good tradesmen, communicate to them a day that you'll need them and have their work not be ready so that they can't work that day. Scheduling, he told me, is absolutely key. What's going to happen is, of course, those tradesmen are going to go find work elsewhere, like we already talked about. What's most important to them is that they get paid. And if your schedule is jacked up and there is downtime, obviously, one, that impacts how timely your project can be completed, which impacts your bottom line because you got holding costs. But two, it's going to impact your ability to keep good tradesmen. And so He said scheduling is super, super important. And I have seen how he does his schedule, and it's very simple. Again, I think what you guys will find, there's no silver bullet. There's no magic answer. There's no magic wand that is going to make your flipping business successful. There's 100 golden BBs, right? There are a ton of these little, small, basic things that you just need to do consistently, and you need to do really, really well. And I feel like the phrase do the boring work is very applicable in the business of flipping and doing so successfully, because you just got to do the boring work over and over and over, and you just got to do it really, really well. And I thought this was a really good example of that. And the way that he does his scheduling is very simple, and it's very easily repeatable for you. He's got a Google Sheet, and each column of the Google Sheet is a different project. And he's got dates in the first column, and it, starts January 1st, January 2nd, January 3rd, all the way down. And he just writes in each of the rows for each project. I need to order cabinets on this date. I need this by this date. I need to schedule paint by this date. Flooring is this date. Bathroom is this date. Tile is this date. And it's very helpful because he can see well in advance what that schedule is going to look like and then plan his subcontractors accordingly. Now, if you are first getting started and you're using general contractors, obviously this is a little bit more difficult, but something I think you can do, and something I have done, is you can just ask your general contractor, hey, I'm curious, how do you do your scheduling? Right? And it comes across genuinely curious and not invasive. And a lot of times their answer is very telling. If their answer is basic and it's not it doesn't have a lot of depth, then it's likely you may have some scheduling issues. Another thing that I have found helpful is asking general contractors, hey, I'm curious, how many people do you actually have as W-2 employees on your team? And I found, surprisingly enough, a general contractor that I've worked with on many, many jobs, they'll say, oh, I have 4. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we have like 5 jobs going at the same time, and you have 4 people working for you. And all I know that means is that they're hiring a lot of subcontractors, which could indicate that they have less control over their scheduling. So those are some good questions, I think, to ask in the beginning if you're using general contractors. But I thought the answer of scheduling was really, really good, because if you want to be in this for the long haul and have longevity, then that is something that you can work towards. So there you have it, straight from the brain of somebody who's going to flip over 50 houses this year. He did the same last year. Incredibly, incredibly successful flipper. Very, very good person. You know his secrets now. And so if you want to flip a whole bunch of houses, those are 3 things that I think you can focus on to make your business better. And I know it's something that I will certainly apply to my business. And I thought they were great insights, so I wanted to share them with you. Really appreciate you guys listening. If you got some value out of this and you think somebody else might benefit from hearing these 3 keys to flipping a whole bunch of houses, share it with them. That's one way you can give me feedback that you like this content. And if you don't like it, that's cool too. But thank you guys for listening. Appreciate your attention. Love you guys. And until the next one, I'll see you. Peace.